Well, it's 12:30. Um, I just welcome everybody that's here right now. And we know how these Zoom meetings are, that there's a couple minutes that people start popping in. So I'm Pam Good, co-founder of Beyond Basics. We feel, as many of you do here today, that illiteracy is an epidemic in our nation, especially with our children. And we think the more that we can advocate, learn, and help each other, we'll get closer to that cure and start giving everybody what they need. And so I'm thrilled that you are here joining us. And we thought what we would do is just to start with it's a 2.5 minute video. It'll give people time to jump into the Zoom with us. And then after that, we'll get started. This video, I would say, it kind of shows the societal impact of illiteracy, and I think that it'll, help kick this summit off in the right direction. So, thank you, and we'll have Alyssa just turn us over to the video here.
Most precious resource, our children. And one key factor will determine whether any given child will become a benefit or a burden to society. That factor is literacy. Unfortunately, in Detroit public schools, 4 out of 5 students fall into the literacy gap, which means they are 1 or more grade level behind. The picture isn't any brighter in Lansing, Flint, or Pontiac. Even in Grand Rapids, 3 out of 6 school districts look like this. And increasingly, the children that fall into the literacy gap in Michigan are minority or economically disadvantaged. The costs of turning a blind eye to this problem are enormous. Consider this. Michigan will spend $15.5 billion in K-12 education this year. Statewide, 54% of our students fall into the literacy gap, which means that $8.4 billion of that investment will not be realized. But let's take a look at this from a student's point of view. Consider 2 10-year-old students, both of whom fall into the literacy gap, assuming one of them bridges that gap while the other does not. By the time they reach 18, the pathways for their lives become vastly divergent. On average, a literate educated adult will earn $50,000 to $60,000 per year, while an illiterate adult will earn less and be much more dependent on the $27 billion in social services Michigan will spend this year. Every year of their adult lives, there is a significant monetary gap that has its origins in the literacy gap. At Beyond Basics, we have a rather unique definition of illiteracy. It's America's largest and most solvable disability. In Detroit, for example, we could significantly improve the lives of 43,000 students for $3,000 per student. The issue we are addressing begins as a literacy gap, but it soon grows into a social justice gap and ultimately, as we've seen, a wealth gap. We have the tools at hand to close that gap. For over 15 years, Beyond Basics has impacted the lives and success of more than 90,000 students. Our methods are proven, powerful, and they transform lives in an average of 6 weeks. You're looking at America's most precious resource. Isn't it time we began treating them like it?
So what we're doing here today is, one step at a time, marching towards eradicating illiteracy. And it's an honor for me and a pleasure to introduce Carolyn Clifford, who's joined us today to host this panel and this summit. Many of you know her as the news anchor at WXYZ, and she's a 17-time Emmy Award winner. And our paths crossed when I guess it's safe to say that you became aware of this illiteracy issue with, I believe, a 65-year-old woman, and who, was quite intimidated to navigate her world, as we all must know, and even let people know that she couldn't read. But Carolyn and I connected, and she's actually trained as a Beyond Basics tutor. and she's been tutoring, people as she crosses, they cross her path, I guess. So I say that because she has a heart for this work. She has a heart for people who haven't been able to read, and I know John's going to share some personal stories later. But Carolyn, pleased to welcome you today. Thank you. You're on mute right now. So yeah. Okay.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you all for joining us for this literacy summit for Beyond Basics. I just want to say off the bat, hopefully you've seen me on Channel 7. I am an anchor and reporter at Channel 7, but I love that lady right there, Pam Good. She's done such wonderful things for our community. And as you just heard Pam say, I met a woman actually in a courtroom in Detroit who was so embarrassed because she said she couldn't go anywhere because she couldn't read, and she had to be there with her sister. And she told me, my sister doesn't want me to approach you, but I need help, and I need to learn how to read. And I asked so many people, is there a program that you know of that can help an adult in Detroit learn to read? And I called around and I called around, and finally my co-anchor, Dave Llewellyn, told me about Pam Good. And so I called Pam and learned about the program, did several stories on the program. And I just want to say one other thing. When you look at that video of all of those children, especially from minority communities, that could have been me on that video, because as a kid who grew up in the city of Detroit and went to Detroit Public Schools, I remember in second grade being in the slow reading group, and my mom switched us to Catholic school in third grade. And I remember being so behind, and I had to catch up in math and I had to catch up in reading, and I didn't know how far behind I really was. And so when I see kids in Detroit, I always say, when you see me on television, you see yourself, because I am them and they are me. So that video is just beautiful. And Pam, you're helping so many people. And so thank you for doing this Beyond Basics Literacy Summit. Just wonderful. So with that said, I know we only have like an hour and a half, or really an hour, right? So I'm going to introduce a wonderful man right now, John Corcoran, and you're going to hear him speak and hear his story, but I do want to read his bio for you. He's the president and CEO and founder of the John Corcoran Foundation. He's an author. John is severely dyslexic and didn't learn to read until the age of 48. And despite his second grade reading level, John graduated from high school and attended the University of Texas at El Paso on an athletic scholarship, where he graduated with his bachelor's degree in education and business administration. He kept his inability to read a secret even while getting his college degree. You know, so many people do that. He taught high school for 17 years and then pursued a career as a real estate developer. His painful childhood and adult experience of being illiterate drove him to prevent others from suffering the same enslavement. He advocates for literacy and started the foundation in 1997 to help prevent and eradicate illiteracy in adults and children across America. And it wasn't until John heard Barbara Bush speak about literacy that he finally decided to learn how to read. After receiving help from a tutor in a literacy program, John could read at a sixth grade level. And to raise awareness of illiteracy, he has shared his own story with Oprah Winfrey, 60 Minutes, and 2020. He has written and published 3 books: The Teacher Who Could Not Read, A Bridge to Literacy, No Child or Adult Left Behind, The Reading Gap, Journey to Answers. I could go on and on, but John, I'm going to let you take over now, because I know you're going to speak about your life and your journey, and you are an amazing man. And I thank you for sharing your story, because I know every time you speak, you help so many people and give people courage out of the shadows and learn to read.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I never imagined in my wildest dream that I would ever be here publicly speaking about me not learning to read or my difficulties. Thank you, Pamela, for creating this opportunity for me to speak. And in watching the video, the literacy gap, the word literacy gap is too kind to describe the condition that we feel and we're put in. It's too polite. This is a national epidemic, a national disgrace, a country that has made promises of equal opportunity, and there is no way you can have equal opportunity if you can't read. And when I speak today, I woke up about 4 o'clock this morning thinking about what I was going to share today. And then I got up and I wrote some notes. And then I got here, and I'm at a house that has dogs. And I was thinking, what do I need to talk to you about? Most of you have some background, some experience, it's like, where do I start? I was 48 years old, and I was reading at the 2nd grade level. I went to a public library, and I was assigned a public or a volunteer tutor at the public library. And for the first 30 days, I was going to quit, because adults that can't read, we bought into a big lie in about the 2nd or 3rd grade. And we were told, maybe not in words, but we felt that something was wrong with our brain. So adults carry with them, in a way, adults in America today are suspended in childhood, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, intellectually, academically. And when I speak about adults, I'm talking about a teenager. We go to school for the first 3 years of our life. We go to school to learn to read. And for the rest of our lives, we read to learn. And I came from a loving home. I was told I was a winner for the first six years of my life, and that I would go off to school like my sisters and learn to read. And sometimes I think about, because people ask me, how could you possibly go through school without learning how to read, and teach school for 17 years without learning how to read? And in retrospect, I've looked at it and tried to answer that question kind of like and searching for answers in my own life, because I didn't really know how I did it. But I do know that I came from a loving home, which was an asset. I had a mother and father. I was told I was a winner, and there was no drugs or alcohol in my family. So I skipped off to school zippity-doo-dah to learn to read. So I had some assets. But when I got to the 2nd grade, my parents must have been lying to me, or the teachers in the 2nd grade, they got it wrong, because I ended up in the dumb row. And about 25% of the population learns to read like birds learn to fly, and another 25% of the population learns to read like I did. And we now, if we've done anything right in the last 25 years, we've done the research. And when I finished with my volunteer tutor, and my volunteer tutor had a heart and had an art, was creative, and helped me get to the 2nd grade, I, in retrospect, called her the ambulance driver that got me to a reading clinic that did some diagnosis tests on me and identified a severe auditory discrimination problem, and I received it. And that was where I met Pat Lindemood, who was a pioneer a researcher and teacher at that time. And now we know for a fact that the auditory discrimination is a real issue for all of us. And we have this science today that I'm excited about, because for probably 30 years ago, we were claiming that dyslexic couldn't learn to read. And now we have science, and the human brain is capable of learning to read. So the literacy issue, teaching people to read, is no longer the big mystery it was before. And we're dispelling a lot of the myths that we can't learn to read. And I learned to read through proper science. I mean, and proper instruction. And I think that this is the big issue, the big question where we are. We're talking about closing the gap. It's the closing the gap between what we know and what we do. I think that we have teachers that and universities haven't been preparing teachers. And so it's really proper instruction. I would not have learned how to read because I like I said, my volunteer tutor had the love of books and the love to help, but she didn't have the science to get me. I outgrew her. And a lot of people are outgrowing their teachers and their tutors. And so I think the real focus for us now, the real issue, the excitement is that we know how to do it. This is one of the social educational problems in this country that we can solve. I want to share a little of my rhetoric with you, and I'm bouncing around a little bit here, and I have a tendency to do that. I have 60 years of literacy and my search for the written word. And I started searching in the second grade. And I like I said, I bought into the lie. It's traumatizing. Illiteracy in America is a form of child neglect and child abuse. It's an epidemic. It's not just Detroit. It's not Michigan. It's the United States of America that is failing our children. And that nobody's doing it intentionally, obviously. Every teacher that wakes up in the morning. I used to think when I was in about the 5th grade, there was a conspiracy not to teach me, but I've grown out of that. And I do believe that teachers have the right heart and desire. And I do think that we have to train teachers. We have to close the gap between what we know and what we do. I think also we are not going to improve the quality of education in America. There is no way, no matter how clever or smart John Corcoran was or is, there's no way to maximize your fullest potential academically if you don't have the reading and writing skills. Reading is the primary language for success in the workplace and in the schoolhouse. And that we have this science now, we have this ability to solve the problem. We still don't have the focus on teaching people to read. There are too many sidebar issues, distractions, and I would say literacy is the most important civil rights, human rights issue of this decade, and until we are prepared to make that commitment to teach children and adults how to read. And I think it's as important to teach an adult to read as it is to teach a child. And obviously I learned when I was an adult. I learned when I was 48 years old. And people ask me, well, what's the difference? Isn't it harder to learn at 48? Well, yeah, it was hard, but that's when I did it. So it is possible. And you know what? If I learned at 48, I should have and could have learned at 8. And that's where we are right now. We've got the information, we've got to get the science out there, and we've got to prepare teachers. And you know what? My good-hearted volunteer tutor, it's unfair to it's unfair to both the learner and the student to expect the ambulance driver to do the surgery. And that's what we continue to do. And the volunteer corps, I love them. I respect them. That's how I got there. I started with that, but that's not going to get it. We're just going to have to. The universities are as responsible as a second grade teacher to break the cycle of illiteracy in America. They haven't changed and they haven't moved. They need to close the gap in what they're doing. So, and sometimes when I speak, I'm trying to get a lot in right now. I don't intend to ruffle anybody's feathers. My feeling is that we don't blame teachers, we train them. And that's really That's what we have to do now. We really have to focus on that, include that in our conversation today. And the good news is that we can learn to read. And I want to tell you something exciting that's happening right now. Let me take you back to when I made the decision to share my story. I guarded my secret, my shame-based secret. I cheated my way through college. I burglarized professors' offices. You know, I had a lot of embarrassment and shame in my story. And when I was asked, after I learned to read, the program that I was in, the director of the program wanted me to share my story. And what are you talking about? My story, that's my life. And I don't even know what my story is. I was too busy surviving. And so I had some conversations with myself about sharing my story. And I spoke to the little boy who was innocent and went to the second grade with high hopes of learning to read, and he didn't get it. And he was passed on. I never failed a grade. I was passed on. I couldn't read. I couldn't write. I couldn't spell. And I'm in the third grade. And I get to the fourth grade. Now this innocent little boy is no longer an innocent little boy. He's, and I believe the human spirit really does resist any way of putting down a person. And the little children learn it fast. By the time I was in the fifth grade, I was now the native alien. I wasn't innocent anymore. I came to school and it was a hostile environment. And I lost, I used to, in the second grade, I used to pray. My morning prayers were, please God, when the teacher calls on me to read, please let the words come out of my mouth. Well, I quit praying when I got in the fifth grade. I gave up on my prayers. I gave up on teachers. I gave up on school. I was, by the time I got to the 7th, 8th grade, I was expelled. I was suspended. I had fights in the classroom. I had it in the library. And this story, my story, is the same story of the native aliens that are in school right now. Check it out. 85% of the kids that are facing juvenile judges today have deficiencies in basic skills of reading at elementary level. 50–60% of the people locked up in our prisons have deficiencies in basic skills of reading at a basic level. So this is not a gap to me. This is not an outrage that we continue to fail. And we're not gonna fix schools until we face this. And you know what John Corcoran did when he was 48 years old? He told the truth, and that was the greatest thing that I did, was able to tell the truth and share that. And one of the things I didn't like about being illiterate was a lack of independence. I was always depending on somebody else. And I think you spoke about a job application. Yeah, people can't fill out a job application. We're underemployed. We're unemployed. It's a tragedy. And an American can send a rocket to the moon and send pictures back, and they can't teach little boys and little girls to read. And then on top of that, being put in the dumb row was really an insult to what my parents had told me. So I was wondering if they had been lying to me about being a winner. But I think deep down, I stayed with what my parents told me. And that was very helpful for me to get through some of it. But it was my school experience from the fifth grade to about the eighth grade was hostile. And I missed school 30 days one time and nobody even reported me. Nobody called my parents. I think the school was taking a vacation from John Corcoran, who was pretty disrupted. I disrupted my own education. I disrupted other people's education. I spit on the backside of a teacher, and I was smart enough to spit on her backside. In the 7th grade, I spent most of my time either in front of the principal's office or inside the principal's office. So, and this story is happening today. I mean, this is a story of teenagers that are frustrated, confused, And I wanted to succeed. I wanted to be good. I wanted to be successful. When I got to the 8th grade, I finally figured out on my own that I was getting the short end of the stick. And I decided that I was going to change. Whatever it took, I was going to change. I had social skills and I had math skills, and I could count money and make change before I went to school. I knew my parents taught me the 10 Commandments. I had that in 7th grade. I figured out social or the scientific method. So I had some tools. I was observing all the time. I was like I learned to navigate myself through the school system. But in the 8th grade, where I really did the flip flop, and I was going to do everything, kiss up, do whatever I could. I had athletic skills. I wanted to get on the field, and I started my career. And in elementary school, I didn't do anything. I didn't cheat. I didn't have to. They just passed me on. I think in the 5th grade, there was only one 5th grade teacher, and she wasn't going to hold me back. She wouldn't risk taking me next year again. That wasn't it. So I think that, and then I got to high school, and like I said, I had social skills. I ended up being the homecoming king, and I ended up dating the valedictorian. And I always relied on smart people, hung around with them. I listened to them, I watched them, I saw how they spoke. I tried to develop my own oral vocabulary. And the other thing, I think the literate world underestimates the depth of not knowing how to read. I want to go back to what Carolyn said also, that I'm severe dyslexic. And one of the things that dyslexic is under the umbrella of learning disabilities. And I think that we really have outgrown that term. I think that we really ought to, all of us in education, really ought to reconsider using the term learning disability. I know some people have invested their whole careers in that term, but you know how arrogant it is? You know how arrogant it is to call another human being learning disabled, not able? Why would you bother to teach me to read if you're going to call me learning disabled? I know how to learn. I learned a lot of things, but my disability was not being able to learn. And you got some diagnostic tools, and it's time for teachers and educators to use scientific language, scientific terms. And what's it mean? Learning disabled, it's a catch-all term. That's what it is. And it's insulting and humiliating, and it's not right. We have 40% in California, 40% of the kids in special education have reading problems. That's what's wrong.
John,
yes.
John, how do you feel about the term learning differences?
It's a little bit improvement, but I would really focus on the reading piece of it.
Yes.
How do you feel about a term like teaching disability or teaching differences?
Yeah.
What's the term mean? Learning differences. It doesn't tell you anything.
I think because sometimes the differences they have don't always present themselves as reading. And so it's kind of a term that we can use to then get someone to the diagnostics, so then we can figure out what the issue is. But that's what we've started doing, is just talk about it as learning differences. And I even look at the kids in the inner city that come out of generational illiteracy as having a difference in that regard of, and I guess it should be maybe learning to read differences, but I think if we categorize it like that. But Carolyn, don't you have we have a couple questions, John, that we were hoping to fit in here.
Let me respond
sure.
to the term itself. How profound is difference in human beings? Are we all different? What kind of definition is that? When Pat Lindemood identified my severe auditory discrimination problem, that was language that was based on science. There was a diagnostic thing, and then she then she attacked that. I spent 100 hours with her, and I moved from the second grade of non-phonic phonetic word attack skills to the 12th grade level. That kind of language is the language of scientists. That's not just a word that's made up to you move learning disability to learning differences.
Well, what's your phrase? What's your phrase then? Because we have to identify it to get people to start seeing it to solve it. So I'd love something that felt better.
I would call, let's really focus on literacy and subliteracy. Let's really focus, really focus in on reading, writing, and spelling. Let's really focus on that. And you know what? I often hear that and heard that little boys and little girls that have learning difficulties or learning differences are behavioral problems. And I'm saying to you,
sure,
teach us to read and we will not be so crazy.
That's right.
Well, John, let me ask you a question. I want to ask you about the program. Maybe you were just mentioning how you went from second grade to 12th grade reading. I want to know the program that you learned to read on, but also I want you to address dyslexia. I work with a photographer who's amazing, but he was dyslexic and he told me about so many issues that he had. But we also know that Cher is dyslexic or that Tom Cruise is dyslexic. So at what point did you learn about dyslexia? And then what program transformed your reading life?
I have a strategy. It's my own personal strategy for survival. And I learned that there was a term dyslexia, which is a Greek word that is defined by people that have difficulty processing language, both the oral and written. Mm-hmm. That's me. I accept that definition. And the strategy that I have, sometimes my good friends, and I love them, they love them to death. They're dyslexic advocates. And they call dyslexia a gift. And my dear friend called it a gift. I had a gift, something special. All these people have gifts, special gifts. And I said, my dear friend, I said, tonight when you pray that all of your grandchildren have this special gift of dyslexia. And if it's a gift, where do I return it? And I think that we focus on these. I think they're part of its distraction. This is my own personal feeling. I don't deny the existence of dyslexia. I don't deny that. But I think that when you talk about compensation or accommodating, for me, the best accommodation for dyslexia is focus 110% in imparting basic skills, reading, writing, and spelling, so he can be independent. So that's what we're looking for. And so it's just a strategy, my strategy. And I think there's too many myths about dyslexia 40 years ago and today. And I never knew. I just thought I was dumb. That was my problem. I thought my brain was screwed up. I got put in the dumb row. That was my impression. I didn't know I was dyslexic. But what I did know, I wanted to learn how to read.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that your parents said and always instilled in you that you were a winner, because obviously you were a winner from the time you were a child, because you wouldn't be here. I mean, you overcame all of the odds and then you're transforming lives now. So you're definitely a winner and your parents were amazing. Let me ask you a question about, you moved 18 times. Do you believe an unstable home environment or the type of environment that you're in, do you think that plays a factor in literacy?
That's a question that I'm often presented, because we're always looking for the answer why this happened. The military children move a lot, and they learn to read, and that's one thing. And the other thing for me, I had 5 sisters, and they were all readers. And every time, and by the way, I want to correct you, I lived in over 35 neighborhoods and houses. I went to 18 different schools. Okay. I went in the 7th grade, I was I was in 3 different schools. And you asked me the question. Every time we moved, my sisters would cry and scream. I mean, they didn't want to move. And I was packing the bags. I was loading the U-Haul truck. Where are we going? I want to get out of town. I want to get out of this mess that I'm in. I want to reform. I want to change. And so for me, I say it saved me. It saved me that I didn't have to live in the same neighborhood, be beat up year after year, labeled, and I got a lot of fresh starts. So that's just kind of my own perception of it. Were my parents irresponsible? I don't think my parents were irresponsible. People want to apply that, but for me, it was part of the Second World War. We were moving. It was, so I didn't see what other people that first glance from other people, my own person, but my sisters did have a different attitude about it that I did. And I could know that because they had I didn't have a social attachment. So I was in trouble. I was in trouble for a good 5 years. I got in high school and then I played my cards right there. And I went on to college and I played a completely different hand. But I was always living the lie. And I think one of the things when I was interviewed by Oprah, she asked me what was one of the important things that happened. I feel like there was a big hole in my soul. And when I learned to read, it was filled, it started filling. And I think this America has a big hole in its soul too. And its big hole is because it's neglecting to teach its children how to read, write, and spell so they can be independent, so they can maximize their fullest potential.
That's right.
Well, John, we appreciate you sharing your story here, and Pam with Beyond Basics is starting to fill that hole. So I hope it continues to get smaller and smaller and smaller until it closes up. We so appreciate you.
Yes.
So Pam, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce our panel right now. And we
Wonderful.
have two wonderful people on our media panel. The first is Jennifer Chambers. Jennifer is the K through 12 education reporter for the Detroit News, a 28-year newspaper veteran. Jennifer has been on staff at the News since 2000, reporting on public schools, philanthropy, federal court, the Justice Department, and Detroit's business community. In 2017, she returned to covering Michigan's 1.5 million school children on that K through 12 beat. Jennifer was the lead reporter on the literacy case for the Detroit News and traveled to Cincinnati to hear oral arguments by the Court of Appeals in the case. She has been interviewed on CNN, NPR, and WDET about her reporting coverage on crime, elections, and education for the Detroit News. So we're so glad that we have Jennifer with us today. And I want to interview RJ King. RJ is the editor and co-founder of D Business Magazine, which launched back in 2006. Prior to starting D Business Magazine, RJ was a business writer for the Detroit News for 16 years, where he wrote articles covering economic development, automotive, aerospace, healthcare, technology, transportation, and other business sectors. RJ also has authored 4 books: Detroit Engine of America, a gold medal recipient for the Midwest Book Awards, Passport to the Corner Office, The Starter's Guide to Corporate Life, 8-Track, the first mobile app, and Mystical. RJ was raised in Bloomfield Village and graduated from the University of Michigan Dearborn. He is a member of the Beyond Basics Board of Directors. So welcome, RJ. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Carolyn.
So glad you guys are with us. So I have some questions we're going to kind of go through, and we may have other people chime in with other questions as well. First up, why don't you give me your reaction to listening to John Corcoran. He's amazing, right? To share his story with all of us.
Yeah, what I took away from this was how candid John is about his experience and how much turmoil he experienced as a child, as a teen, struggling with reading. And I know we all want to reach kids. We want to teach them how to read. But, there's a lot that need to be addressed when kids need help reading, from their life, social, emotional health, to getting it, whether they have dyslexia or not. And that's why it's so important that I think we use the systems we know that work, these diagnostic tests, these interventions, and have to keep working at it. But it was heartbreaking to hear how much angst he had trying to figure out how to read, get that right help. And I applaud his story and that he's sharing it, because I know there are people out there who are listening who can relate to that.
Absolutely. RJ, what do you think?
I'm just amazed that the school systems that John was in passed him from grade to grade, and I've been seeing it again and again in Detroit, as Beyond Basics focuses on the illiteracy there. And, you know, when I went to school, you really didn't have a grasp of what was going on in the greater world. But I remember, you know, fortunately being able to read, and I would never have been passed, I don't think, from grade to grade without some sort of a remedial help. I went to Catholic schools. But I'm just amazed, John, that you survived all of that and you flourished, and now the author of 3 books. So congratulations to you. But the school system failed you. And that's what we're working to address Beyond Basics.
I agree with you. And I know we all sort of mentioned a story out of Baltimore with a kid who is now a senior in high school, but he's going to have to go all the way back to 9th grade because he failed nearly all of his classes. And yet he still ranks almost in the, I don't know, the upper 50% of his class. And yet he has failed. I just think schools have to have some accountability. I know in my high school, and I went to Catholic school too, but my high school in Detroit, I mean, I had teachers call me or call, you know, my assistant principal call me to the office anytime I got in trouble. So, or was failing a class or having trouble in a class. I mean, I just think teachers can make a big difference, and the school system can make a big difference, but they have to be accountable. Let me ask you this. Either one of you can tackle this. You know how many kids are illiterate in Michigan. I mean, it's a big number. And I want to talk about the 3rd grade reading law, and how do you think it's affected literacy so far in all of our communities? Is it a good thing? And I know you don't want to give your personal opinions, but just in your coverage so far, talking to people, the reaction in the community. Jennifer, you want to start?
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is talk about how Michigan schools are addressing literacy and what the 3rd grade reading law is doing now. So just some history. When the pandemic began in March of 2020, Governor Whitmer suspended the 3rd grade reading law. It was supposed to take effect for the first time that spring, and it's based on state assessments in reading for 3rd graders. So any 3rd grader who does not pass the reading test at grade level can be retained. But the governor suspended that law. Now we're in another school year with many kids have never returned to the classroom since March. Kalamazoo Public Schools' entire school district has never gone back. Ann Arbor schools are just going to go back later this month. So the 3rd grade reading law remains in play now, which is very interesting. Schools have been told to follow the interventions and requirements in that law. We will find out in a few weeks and months whether that's actually still true, because it's based on whether we have state assessments and they can use test scores to retain kids. But what I can tell you is that based on my interviews, teachers in elementary schools are highly focused on these literacy interventions. And the law requires in Michigan within the first 30 days of school that a child is tested and to find out where they're at. If they're on grade level, great. If they need additional help, they create an individual reading plan for that child. And they have one-on-one tutoring through reading recovery coaches. Teachers pull kids in small groups. But to add to this, we're in the pandemic. And in a school district I went into this morning, 12 kids were in the classroom getting reading help and 12 kids were home online. So this single teacher navigated between 12 kids in her classroom, teaching them how to read, and 12 kids who are on a Zoom call like we are, raising their hand, showing their books. And I was just so impressed with how well this teacher handled this. But we're asking a lot of our teachers right now to simply teach kids basic things. But in terms of literacy, none of the educators I've interviewed, superintendents, districts like the third grade reading law. They think retention is a terrible idea. They think it's demoralizing and punitive, and that it doesn't teach kids how to read. But the good news is that all the interventions that are in the law are still going on in Michigan schools across K3, K5. And it looks different in every district. But the ones that I've been to and talked to folks on, they see it's a huge priority, and kids are being assessed within 30 days. And then they're doing more benchmark assessments mid-year and end of year to see where they're at. So they're trying really hard. What I wonder though, is after hearing John speak, is it's not clear what we're doing in middle school and high school to catch kids who are not reading. The reading law doesn't apply to older kids. And what literacy interventions are in place in middle and high schools depends on that local district and what they've decided to do on their own. I know Beyond Basics has the tutoring program that goes across all grades, and it was focused on getting into Detroit high schools, but the pandemic hit and most of that work's being done online. But statewide, it's not really clear how kids who could have missed this pocket of intervention in elementary school and been promoted, how they're being helped. So that's probably something that needs to be addressed still.
Absolutely. This pandemic has thrown so many things into chaos. I know I've been around schools where, I mean, kids don't have food at home. I don't know if you saw the story about the little girl. I think she was in third grade or something, and she was on a Zoom call with her teacher, and she just started crying and saying she was hungry. She couldn't even think. She couldn't concentrate.
Right.
It's been so difficult, and so many kids don't have computers at home or don't have the ability to get online. So RJ, I wanted you to weigh in on that same question. You know, what do you think?
Well, I think, as a taxpayer, and everybody here is a taxpayer, we earmarked money to provide children with a first-class education, and the school systems in general have failed. I applaud Governor Snyder for coming up with and pushing through the third grade reading law. Governor Whitmer, I understand, probably had to waive it for this school year due to COVID. Hopefully it is brought back next year. And then you look at all the money that, as was shown in the video, all the money that goes into social services for, what's this called, people that struggle to read or can't read. There's going to be problems when those children get into their teen years and their adult years. Most of them probably will go to jail at some point or be arrested. There's a lot of studies that show that people can't read become bullies because they're acting out and trying to show that they're the boss when really they are trying to make up for the fact that they can't read. And I think, we've seen multiple videos where teachers stand next to children and very proud of juniors and seniors in high school and how good they're doing, but at the same time, these kids can't read. And I really think that the educational system really needs to be revamped. I think the unions, we have to be brought into this whole situation, and really we need to focus on literacy and making sure that children read at the very least, because they'll have a much better chance of being successful later in their life.
Absolutely. I did a story on a young man who went through the Beyond Basics reading program. As a senior, he was on his way to college, and he talked about how he would always fight in class or get in trouble. So he would be sent to the principal's office just so he wouldn't be embarrassed and wouldn't have to read in class. And he was a really big boy because he was a football player, and he actually started crying because through the Beyond Basics program, he learned how to read and could read a book to his mom for the first time his senior year in high school. I want to ask you this. Do you think people realize how big a literacy problem we really have in America? Do you think people really understand that or have a grasp of it?
No, I don't. I think that until you sit down and start talking about the issue and you hear from someone, an expert in education who, can talk about kids being assessed, and the numbers start coming out, that you don't realize the depth of the problem, the pervasiveness of the problem. I mean, we report out M-STEP scores every year, and 55% of third grade students across the state of Michigan couldn't pass the test. That doesn't mean all of them can't read, but that's one of the tools we use to measure proficiency in reading. So that number in itself, we've reported for years. I feel like I write the same story every year the M-STEP comes out. The numbers barely changed. The last time we had a test was 18-19, and Detroit actually showed improvement in its scores. The new superintendent was in place, and so the needle was moving there, but statewide, the needle is not moving. But we haven't had test scores in a year, and we may not have a state assessment again, so we won't know statewide. But no, I think also, when you have kids or you're in education, you're aware of this problem, but outside, I think there's a presumption that kids know how to read if they're in school, and if they graduate, they're literate, and that's not accurate.
So RJ, how do you think we make literacy the first order of business in America? I mean, how do we cut through the mustard and make people understand we really need to tackle this problem, and we really need to tackle this problem now?
Classify it as an epidemic.
Yeah, I agree.
Because otherwise you won't get people's attention. And I think what we're doing at Beyond Basics is really putting the message with numbers. It does cost $3,000. We've calculated throughout the high schools of Detroit, it would take $33 million in extra money raised through gifts, donations, grants to get all of those students in the high schools in Detroit up to or surpassing their grade level in reading. That's money that really shouldn't be spent on that. And again, the number gets tremendously larger once you start looking at all the social services that the state of Michigan, for example, pays for once students get out of school, if they even finish school. And we should be, look at the charter schools, and they've been very successful. Why? Because the public schools have not been doing their job. And I really think that we really have to classify the literacy problem as an epidemic across America, and that hopefully, and I think it would, get people's attention. Absolutely. And you have to stay on top of it too. It just can't be, we're going to do this for a few months and then everything's going to be fine. It's a systemic problem, and I think laws like the third grade reading law, when implemented, will do a great service. And it's not for the adults, it's for the children.
Absolutely. Now, I know we have a lot of people who have entered the Zoom meeting, and people have been sending in questions from our chat room. I have one here. It says, is Beyond Basics still teaching virtually? How has that affected the 6-week reading results, and any other impacts you care to mention? Now, well, RJ, oh, go ahead.
I'd say just real quickly, and then maybe Pam could chime in because she knows the details better than I. But fortunately, we had been working towards offering a virtual platform Beyond Basics, and it was just serendipitous that it was ready right when the pandemic started, and it's been very successful. And then there's been also assistance from major corporations to help provide the iPads and technology and the hookup to cable to get those services into homes, but more needs to be done. Pam, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yes, we are, doing the virtual work, K-12, mostly Detroit high school kids, onboarding them. We've worked closely with the district because logistically, just getting connected with students since they're home. But it's going well, considering all the obstacles we have. And when someone does complete online, complete the program, we get the same results as we do in person. So it's getting kids to show up during this time when they have so many other things going on. But it's a blessing that the virtual does work right now. So we're thankful for that.
Wow. I have one other question from our chat room. It says, the pandemic has exacerbated the reading epidemic. Our phenomenal teachers are stretched and can only do so much. Interventions have to ramp up as we go into summer 2021 to remedy the pandemic's impact. Fall 2021 will be a tough start with more than 1/5 of the year into this. Any ideas for summer help? Anybody want to chime in on that? Any ideas for?
Well, I know a lot of school districts are talking about summer school, but that doesn't translate into help with literacy. I know other states are doing things like literacy camps, other types of programs. I don't know yet. You know, what happens in Michigan is done by every single district. There's very rarely a statewide approach to anything. So I know most school districts know they need to continue trying to educate children over the summer, but I'm not aware that any specific literacy efforts are underway or planned at this time. If there are, I'd love to hear from someone.
Anybody else want to chime in on that one, RJ or Pam? No. Now I know we're on Zoom and we have time constraints. So I want to introduce a video. It's called Teach Me to Read. This video was made by the Beyond Basics team 10 years ago. They wanted to learn to read then, and they still want to do it today. So we're going to play this video for everybody right now. Made by the Beyond Basics team 10 years ago. They wanted to learn to read then, and they still want to do it today. So we're going to play this video for everybody right now. Made by the Beyond Basics team 10 years ago. They wanted to learn to read then, and they still want to do it today. So we're going to play this video for everybody right now. Made by the Beyond Basics team 10 years ago. They wanted to learn to read then, and they still want to do it today. So we're going to play this video for everybody right now.
You teach me to read.
Made by the Beyond Basics team 10 years ago. They wanted to learn to read then, and they still want to do it today. So we're going to play this video for everybody right now.
You teach me if you teach me to read.
Made by the Beyond Basics team 10 years ago. They wanted to learn to read then, and they still want to do it today. So we're going to play this video for everybody right now.
So that
I apologize that my voice kept popping up there.
Sorry
Yeah.
about the technical.
That's okay. I don't know. Alyssa, do you think we can try it and see if it's
Yeah.
a go this time? It's a sweet
Yep.
video, and I think it's, you know, from the mouths of our children. Maybe we can help wake us up. So we'll give it a go again. A go this time. It's a sweet
Yep.
video, and I think it's, you know, from the mouths of our children. Maybe we can. It's not working, Alyssa. We'll have to give it a go again. Yep. Except we'll have to. So.
I think we could actually send it out in a follow-up email.
Yeah,
to
we can do
everybody.
that. We'll do that. It's really sweet. It's our kids just saying, teach me to read. And I think what, you know, John said, and everybody's saying it here. I mean, if we just teach our kids to read, they're going to get on in life well. And I do think that if there's anything that comes out of this, you know, the governor's office, I know we have this 3rd grade reading law, but it makes perfect sense that you ensure that every child can read when you're rolling out a curriculum that requires it. And I think we just need to embrace this as a state and, you know, just come up with those resources and get every child an assessment and every child exactly what they need to learn to read. And so many other things would fall into place if we would just do that. And just make one last comment. John, when you talk about your story and your childhood, I mean, it just pulls at our hearts. I mean, you're talking about a lifetime, your whole childhood. And, you know, nothing can make up for all that you suffered because of it. But I'm so glad that you can help people start to see that we have to do this. We just have to do this work. And so I just ask everybody here, you know, advocate, 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 and do what you can because people just aren't aware of it yet. So back to you, Carolyn. above here.
I think I figured it.
Carolyn, you're muted.
Sorry, I did that because I thought my voice kept coming through on the video. Pam, I just want to say thank you again for having this summit, and again for everything that you do for children. You're truly making a difference with Beyond Basics. John, I just thank you for being here and having the courage to share your story for so many people. Like Pam said, we know you've gone through a lot of heartache, but boy, your parents said you were a winner, and you really are a winner. I mean, sometimes you go through heartache, but you come out better on the other end. And just like the woman I met in the courtroom who's so afraid, when they hear your story, then they're not so afraid. And they feel like if you could come forward and at 48, you could learn to read, so can they. So it's so important that you're sharing your story. And I appreciate you doing that. And RJ and Jennifer for lending your voices on our media panel and taking out the time, because we're all busy.
May I have a quick
Thank you.
comment here?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I got good news that we're working on a documentary film,
Oh, great.
and we're working with a storyteller who's won 22 Emmys. And our hope is to change the conversation in terms of literacy, and we hope that it will help start a national movement and a conversation. And I greatly appreciate your efforts here. Sometimes when I talk, I'm pretty happy camper. I'm really fortunate to have such a great life, and I usually have an opportunity to speak to live people, and I get some feedback from them with emotions. I can't get any emotions here, and I don't want anybody to think I'm a raging maniac here. I have a passion, and I can get into that little boy's feelings. I can get into that teenager's frustrations, and I know that we're getting closer to a solution. And I know it's really important for us to be properly prepared. Teachers, it's more than a heart. It's more than art. It's an ever-growing amount of science out there that's there, and we've got to close that gap between what we know and what we do. And I really do appreciate your efforts. And I'm fortunate to have an issue bigger than myself to deal with. It kind of contains that ego issue. But,
Well, John, you stay safe and stay healthy. You look great. And I know everybody who's been listening and in our chat room, I know they feel the same way.
I want to share with you an email on the kind of an update of the progress of the film. I think
Okay,
it's
go for it.
a great, we're reaching out to a lot of different people and opinions and so on.
And we can share it also to the group, John.
Okay, good.
We'll share it in an email too, but go ahead and tell everyone.
No, I'm gonna share it with you in an email if you send it.
Okay, we'll send it out.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
We really have we just have a cast of superstars that are gonna
Wonderful.
giving their voice, and
Yeah.
I think it's
Good.
gonna be a good one.
Well,
Good.
that
We look forward
And I
to
learned
it.
something today too, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, that's beautiful. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for your time today and for being a part of the Beyond Basics 2021 Literacy Summit. I hope you all are staying safe. I hope your families are staying safe. I hope you get vaccinated when you can. And hopefully 2021, after what, May, when we've all been vaccinated, life will get a little bit back to normal.
Yes. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
Carolyn.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Okay.
I had a question.